Chapter 2, A Summer of Silk Moths by Margaret Willey. Moth Journal. Hylophora ceracopia are of the family Saturniidae or silk moths, a family containing over 1,000 species, all but some 200 of them tropical. And yet the huge ceracopia, the largest of the North American silk moths, is common to the swamp and forest of the Midwest. Mrs. Shelton said it would be easy to catch one near the river. Ceracopia is sometimes called the robin moth because of its similar coloring to the American robin, such a fantastic nighttime counterpart to that completely ordinary bird. Ceracopia are huge moths with a wingspan of up to 6 inches. The adult male's torso is orange-red and furry, banded with white. Its wings are grayish-brown with dark eye spots along the upper edge. At the center of the hind wings are pale crescent shapes called lunals because they look like half moons. These neutral colors make Ceracopia easily camouflaged, but I can say for sure that they are distinctive and beautiful up close, having held one in my hand. The sexes are similar, but the males have slightly smaller bodies than the females and more pointed torsos. Females are rounder, and only the males have the incredibly feathered antenna that I saw on the moth in my hand. Females have a narrow, less feathery antenna. Mrs. Shelton said there are probably a few females in the maple tree sending out pheromones, a secreted hormone, that were attracting male moths for miles away. I've been reading everything I can find about Ceracopia from Mrs. Shelton's field guide for lepidopterists. She's really excited that I am interested in moths, and she keeps bringing more books out of her office and letting me take them home. She has her own library. What I really want to do is go into the swamp at night and see the real thing again, a large moth in the wild, maybe even catch one and bring it to the lab, put it under a microscope, and see these amazing wings up close. Chapter 2, Abe's Mistake. So how long have you known that Abe's brother had a daughter? I asked Graham. She was serving meatloaf, wearing a white lab coat from her teaching days that now served sometimes as an apron, sometimes as a gardening smock. She put a thick slice on my plate, exchanged a quick private glance with Gramps, and then calmly asked back, "Why do you ask?" Always answering a question with another question. "Graham, why didn't you ever tell me that Abe's brother had a daughter?" She lowered her small gray head, preparing a careful and accurate answer. "There was a girl born just after the accident, named after Elnora. We never saw her, not really, so there wasn't much to tell. Her mother left Buchanan right after she was born." Gramps added, "Packed up her car and sold that little house near downtown and just took off." He made a disappearing gesture with his hands. "That was the last we saw of that one. Do you remember her name, Ida?" "Linda," Gramps said shortly, like she didn't enjoy remembering it. "From Indianapolis." She tipped her head in my direction, puzzled again. "Did Abe bring this up with you today?" "As a matter of fact," I announced importantly, "Nora McMichael arrived all by herself last night on the train. I guess it's the first time she'd ever come here. I mean, since her mom left Buchanan." Gramps put down his fork and stared at me in disbelief. "Paul McMichael's daughter is here?" Gramps pressed one hand to the collar of her smock. "Her mother let her come back here?" "Why wouldn't she?" I asked. "Her uncle lives here." The two of them exchanged another uncertain glance. "She's with Abe?" Graham asked. "At the cabin?" I pointed my fork at Graham. "Why are you so surprised? Why are you both surprised that her mom let her come here?" "There were many hard feelings," Graham said quietly. "Between who?" "Nora's mother and Abe." "But it wasn't Abe's fault," Gramps insisted. "He was just a boy who loved his brother more than anybody." He stopped and broke into an ear-to-ear smile. "Ida, she forgives him," he exclaimed. "She sent that little girl all this way to finally get to know her father's brother." Graham was smiling too. "Eleanor's own granddaughter," she said. "Oh, she must be so thrilled to be here." I pictured Nora's face. Thrilled was not the word that came to mind. "How old would you say this girl is?" I asked. "She was born a year or so after you were, Peter," Graham replied. "She must be somewhere around 15 or 16. "Not so little anymore," Gramps added. "Have you actually seen her, Peter? Did Abe bring her out to the riverside?" "Not yet," I said. "I only saw her for like 5 minutes at the cabin." "Is she tall like the McMichaels?" Graham asked. "And pretty?" Her father was so very tall and handsome. "All I noticed was her hair," I said, dodging. I didn't want to tell them what a puffy-faced, snarling bitch she'd been. "A redhead," Grandma guessed, "with bright blue eyes?" "Oh, I wonder if she looked like Elnora Conrad. You'll just have to bring her out here, Peter, and let us see for ourselves. I can show you pictures of her grandmother as a girl, and Nora and I, we were best friends, I finished. I'd heard it a million times. Unexpectedly, Graham's eyes filled with tears. She rummaged through pockets for a Kleenex, covering both of her eyes with it. Graham, come on, I said impatiently. Graham's patted one of her hands, and I patted the other, and we waited for her to pull herself together, which she did fairly quickly. She was a no-nonsense kind of person, like Graham. She'd been the biology teacher at the local high school for 40 years. I dropped the subject of Nora McMichael, but noticed the two of them privately exchanging glances of joy as though the rest of the meal. I didn't have the heart to tell them that Abe's long-lost niece wasn't friendly, wasn't pretty, and probably wouldn't be around for more than a few days. So did you talk to her? I asked Abe the next morning as he came in. The Moths were waiting for me in the basement, but I stayed upstairs to watch for him. He arrived late and looked again like he hadn't slept well. A little bit, he said, settling in behind his desk. She's not easy to talk to right now. She must have told you something. He sighed and rubbed his forehead. Apparently there were problems with her parents. I guess her mom took off a few days ago, leaving Nora and her little sister with her stepdad. Taking a pretty big chance, wasn't she? Just assuming you would take her in when you never even met her? He agreed quietly. Yeah, she took a big chance coming here. How does she even know where to find you? I guess she knew I lived in Buchanan, looked me up in a phone book at that public library, and then figured out on her own how to get here, planned it out, made the arrangements. She's a smart girl. He sounded almost admiring. I felt a pang of unease. So what did the two of you do last night? She needed some things, clothes, other stuff. She didn't bring much with her. I took her to the mall. Wow, nice guy. I hope she thanked you. When I met her, she wasn't acting very happy to be here. She's kind of stressed out, nervous about not hearing yet back from her mom. So when will you bring her out to Riverside? Oh, no, she won't come here. She needs to be at the cabin when her mom calls. I couldn't hide my surprise, but Abe lowered his head, ducking my reaction and moving in the kitchen to start coffee. I followed him to the doorway and watched him as he rummaged for filters. He was chewing his lip, ignoring me. Are you thinking it might be weird for her to go see this place? I asked. I'm not thinking anything. This place isn't why she's here, and she's not staying. She's got an old score to settle with her mom. Right, but it just seems like she's a little curious. Well, she's not. I let it go. It wasn't so hard to believe. She could easily have been the kind of girl who'd rather watch TV all day than hike a rail trail or paddle a canoe. Most of the girls on my high school were like that. Couldn't stand to be away from the mall, couldn't handle a few mosquito bites, and I wasn't looking. I had other things keeping me busy, Riverside projects, something new every day. I waited for the coffee to brew, poured a cup for myself, and then wandered down to the basement to study the silk moths. For the rest of Nora's first week in Buchanan, I made various sketches, trying several mediums, pencil, pen, a few watercolors with the more colorful specimens, and looking up information about each moth in several of the field guides Graham had given me. Every hour or so, I'd come up from the basement to check on Abe and try to get him to talk about what was going on at the cabin. What does she do by herself all day? I wondered aloud. She waits for the phone to ring. She needs a cell phone. Says she can't even go for a walk until I get her one. Don't buy her a cell phone, I scolded. I knew that he had already spent way too much on this girl, buying her a television, a comforter, an alarm clock. It was getting ridiculous. She's been cleaning the cabin, Abe said. She says it helps her nerves. You can't believe how clean my place is now, he smiled. What do you guys talk about? Does she ask questions about your brother? Not at first, but lately. He leaned forward in his chair, suddenly excited to tell me something. A few nights ago, he confided, I pulled out some of Paul's old LPs and an old turntable. She'd never really even seen an LP before. She had no idea how you played them. I told her that his favorite band had been Creedence Clearwater Revival. Then she wanted to go and play all of his old Creedence, over and over, really loud. He was smiling, proud of himself for some reason. You never told me that, I said. You said his favorite band was the Grateful Dead. He liked them too. I forgot about the Creedence thing. I haven't listened to those records since way back when we still lived on Butler Street. There was something in his tone, almost a kind of gratitude, and unnerved me. Gratitude? You know, Abe, you could always find out yourself where the mother is and just put this girl on a bus. I could do that, he said vaguely. Well, I guess if she's going to be around a little longer, Graham and Gramps want to meet her. This brought back his attention. They know she's here? Sure, I told them. They're all excited. They want to see if she looks like Elnora. I said this kind of mockingly, forgetting for a moment that Elnora had been Abe's mother. I hesitated, watching him. Curiosity got the best of me. So does she look like Elnora? He announced softly, she reminds me of Paul. Paul, I repeated. I was thinking the Paul who was so smart and handsome. Oh, yeah, little things. The way she eats cereal, the way she sneezes. I have to work really hard not to stare at her when she talks. And the weird thing is, she doesn't even know. She has no idea that she's reminding me of him because she never knew him. He shook his head. It knocks me out, Pete. It just knocks me out. There it was again, the same unfamiliar tone, awe, and gratitude. It made me feel something I wasn't used to feeling around Abe, excluded. The need to clarify what was unfolding at his cabin grew inside of me, and all that morning and through the afternoon I couldn't shake it off. Even the hours spent in my workshop staring at wings and antennae and striped furry bodies did not relieve it. She was picking blackberries from the bushes at the side of Abe's cabin as I approached, and I had to hide my surprise at how different she looked from the first morning. Her cheeks were clear, and she lost the bruised shadows under her eyes and the circle of red around her pierced eyebrow. She was wearing a navy blue t-shirt, and it looked brand new. It made her eyes an intense, almost unnatural shade of blue under blonde eyebrows, and she had done something different with her hair. It was shinier, or maybe just clean, with loose curls all around her forehead. I remembered my Graham's question and thought maybe I could say that she was pretty, improved, certainly, but not one bit happy to see me. She held her bowl of blackberries close to her stomach like she expected me to snatch it away and asked, "What do you want?" "Don't be so paranoid. I just need a couple of boards for a shelf I'm hanging in my workshop." She gestured with her chin towards Abe's shed. "Knock yourself out." Instead, I planted myself behind her. "Hey, is there some reason you're so unfriendly?" She ignored this, but I wasn't about to give up. I took a minute to recompose my rusty charms and tried again. "So are you enjoying your first time ever visiting Buchanan?" "Every day a new thrill," she muttered. "Okay, I'll take that as a yes. How much longer are you staying?" "I'm leaving tomorrow." "You are? Hey, you really should come out and see Riverside before you go, since it's going to be a nature preserve named after your dad and everything." I watched her arm freeze over the blackberry bush. It hung in the air a moment, the narrow back of her hand outstretched, the fingernails bitten down. "What are you talking about?" she asked. "Riverside, home of the almost finished Paul McMichael Nature Center. Don't you at least want to see it?" "That's what he does all day? Goes to the Paul McMichael Nature Center?" I nodded proudly. "A nature center named after my dad?" "Well, he was pretty important around here. People still remember him, and plus the property, Riverside, belonged to your dad originally, and now it's Abe's. It's 100 beautiful acres right on the St. Joe River." She seemed really confused now. 100 acres? My uncle owns 100 acres? That my dad used to own? It was the Shelton estate before that. My grandparents owned it, and they named it Riverside. There's a house and a barn and a couple of outbuildings and a bunch of gardens. Abe hasn't mentioned any of this? She shook her head impatiently. "Where is my uncle now?" "He's in Niles for the afternoon, seeing his lawyer about—" "Then can you take me?" She pointed to my truck. "You mean now?" "Because I didn't mean now. I wasn't actually planning to." She put her free hand on her hip. "Look, do you want me to leave this place or not? Because seriously, I'm probably leaving tomorrow." All right. Just let me get some boards out of the shed, and then I'll drive you over there." I happened to glance down at her feet and saw that she was wearing plastic flip-flops. Her toenails were painted the same shade of blue as her t-shirt. "You can't wear sandals," I said. It came out sounding bossier than I intended. "No, I just mean you'd be more comfortable in regular shoes. We'll be outdoors. Mud and briars. Nature. Get it?" She rolled her eyes. "Oh, fine. Just a minute." She strode back to the porch, flipping blackberries into her mouth and swishing her hips back and forth. Exaggerated swishing. She knew I was watching her. She took her sweet time. "Hey, nice wheels," she said sarcastically once she had settled into my truck. She put one foot on the dash, showing me that she changed in even more ridiculous shoes, sandals with heels. I patted the cracked dash. "Love this baby," I said. "Not exactly in the same league as Abe's Jeep, but hey, it gets me where I need to go." I didn't pretend to be interested. "So how exactly did my dad get 100 acres on the river?" she asked. My grandparents sold Riverside to your grandmother like 17 years ago, I explained, and then she died and left the property to Paul, and Abe inherited it when he turned 18. I've been working there full time since school got out. Abe wants to have this place ready for the public in a year or so, but I'm actually kind of surprised he hasn't told you any of this himself. He doesn't talk much, in case you haven't noticed. She sounded critical of Abe, and I felt protective. There's something you should know about me and Abe, I went on. I don't just work for him. I've known him practically since I was born. He even lived with us after his brother died. I caught myself remembering suddenly that this brother would be her father, a man she'd never met. I didn't want to sound unfeeling about it. I stared at the road and shut up for a minute, and I finished. Anyway, I'm just saying that your uncle and me, we go way back. Yeah, well, I go way back with him, too. That's why you never met him until a week ago, I replied in my head, but I wouldn't have said it aloud. Not that afternoon. I wanted her to understand about me and Abe, but I was also starting to see this as an opportunity to impress her. Now that she was beside me, I was noticing things, like how great she smelled and how long her legs were. I was trying not to glance too often at the front of her T-shirt, but I secretly decided that her breasts were perfect, not too big, not too small, jiggling slightly from the bumpy road. I was determined to give her a memorable tour of Riverside, which her father had loved, and which my grandparents had loved, and which Abe and I now loved, and which maybe she would also love. I was sure that it would at least change her opinion of me. We were driving north on Wrangell Road, and we came to the small, inconspicuous sign I had made to mark the entrance to the Paul McMichael Riverside Nature Center, a sign that I had word-burned and posted myself on the otherwise unmarked drive. As I slowed my truck down, I noticed that Nora was staring at the sign wide-eyed, as though she still couldn't fully believe what I said, or maybe she hadn't believed me when I said there was a nature center named after her dad just a short drive away from Abe's cabin. Here we are, I said unnecessarily. I turned in the narrow gravel road and drove past the birches and pines at the entrance to a stretch of prairie. The prairie grass was simmering so intense that I had to flip my visor down. Nora was squinting too, biting her lip and holding the dash as we bumped along. The truck made its way along the gravel road, and then we climbed to an elevated spot from which we could see ahead of us the circle of buildings that had been the Shelton estate. Another small sign that I had recently wood-burned was posted just before the empty parking lot. It read, "I will walk alone by the black, muddy river and sing me a song of my own." That's from a Grateful Dead song, Nora gasped. I was impressed that she knew this. Right you are, Black Muddy River, one of his favorites. She glared at me. What the hell do you know about his favorites? It's just something Abe told me. She looked away, scowling. I pulled into the parking lot in silence, beginning to suspect that I had made a mistake that was intensifying by the second. By the time we were walking towards the visitor center, I'd upgraded my situation to a full-out disaster. Nora stormed up the porch ahead of me, shoulders hunched, arms crossed tightly, wearing an expression of rage. I tried to make feeble small talk, but she wasn't listening to me anymore. She was in her own world, soaking up the details of the office, our headquarters, the gum booths, the camera tripod, the file cabinets, the bookshelves, the posters. She picked up Graham's Peterson Field Guide to Insects from the corner of my desk and then tossed it back like it disgusted her. On the wall behind my desk was a framed map I'd drawn of Riverside. Nora put her face up close to it. "Who drew this?" she demanded. "I did," I said. I lifted my hands, a little afraid she would tear it off of the wall. Then she was peering at it with some other drawings I had taped to the wall, a great blue heron, an otter, a white-tailed deer, until her eyes settled on a recent photograph of our 2 Riverside volunteers, standing side by side in the herb garden with their hose upright. "Who are these people?" "Christina and Bella," I said, "our volunteers." She pointed to another photograph on the same wall, a snapshot of a plaque that Abe had recently installed at the back of the lodge. "What is this?" She squinted to read the text. "It looks like it's somebody's name." My heart sank. "Whose name?" she demanded. I didn't answer, and she said, "Show me where it is." "Maybe you should wait for your uncle, Nora. He might want to." "I'm not waiting for my uncle. Come on, you know everything. Show me where this is." And she strode past me, making me jump to get out of her way. The plaque faced the prairie, reflecting the sun as we approached. Nora saw it from 50 yards away and started walking ahead of me, making surprisingly forceful strides in her ridiculous shoes. I was dragged behind her, aware that every step I took was plunging me deeper into my mistake. When Nora reached the plaque, she stopped abruptly and leaned close to it, squinting again, as if trying to decipher a code. I already knew what it said. I had helped mount the plaque myself 3 months ago. In memory of Paul McMichael, 1971 to 1991. Okay, you've seen it, I said, speaking to her back. Come on, Nora. Let's just go see if Abe is back in the office. At that moment, to my great relief, I saw Thor bounding through the trees, saw that Abe was not far behind him, coming in a clip, charging along in his khaki shorts and hiking boots. But when he was close enough for me to read his expression, I saw that he was in a state of dismay. He called Nora's name sharply, but she did not turn around. She asked me to bring her here, I called out weakly. Nora, he repeated, then was standing directly behind her, waiting for her to turn around. You weren't going to tell me about this place, were you? She said from between her teeth. I wasn't. I didn't. Nora, I just didn't know how to explain. She whirled around. This whole place, everything, named after him, all this stuff, everything you're doing out here, the office, the signs, this plaque with his name on it, Paul McMichael this, Paul McMichael that. Were you ever going to tell me? Didn't everyone think I should know? Then she pointed to me and shrieked. I have to find out from this freak here that this entire nature center named after my dad ever exists. I found my voice. Hey, who are you calling a freak? I yelled back after her. Back to the office, Pete, Abe said. Nora and I need to talk. Oh, yeah, she cried, throwing back her head and addressing the sky. Now we need to talk? Now we need to tell Nora about a few things we were hoping she would never know. She would just head back to Indiana and never bother her uncle ever again and never know there was a stupid plaque on the side of this stupid building in the middle of fucking nowhere that named after my dad. Abe looked so upset that I sprang into protective mode. Will you quit yelling at him? I barked, making a move to get between them. Pete, go back, Abe commanded, and this time it was such an unmistakable order that it made me freeze. He said it again in a more normal voice, but still with an edge. Go back to the office now, please. It was the first time in all these years I've known him that he had ever sent me away. West of the pond, the ecology trail intersects with the river trail, and close to the intersection is a stairway made of railroad ties. A shortcut to the banks of the river. At the bottom of the stairs is a grassy crag that Abe had long ago named after his mother, Elnora's Point, a small peninsula that marks a bend in the river just south of the docks where we bank our canoe. At Elnora's Point stands one of the first official purchases we made for the Nature Center, a wooden bench looking out over the water. I carefully wood-burned Elnora's name into one of the black back slats. It was a perfect spot to see cranes, herons, osprey, and even an occasional owl. I sometimes came to the spot with my sketch pad and sometimes just to watch the river change. Abe kept an old metal canoe parked on the riverbanks. He told me that when he and Paul used to canoe from the boat slip in Buchanan, this was the place where they always docked and came ashore. I remember eating peanut butter sandwiches right here, the two of us. He told me that day we carried the railroad ties down the riverbanks. As we placed them in a row on the incline to the river, a great blue heron had lifted into flight from a small patch of island farther down the river. Man, I love seeing the great blues, Abe had said that day. When I was a kid, we never saw them. They were almost completely gone. Now I see them all the time. Paul would have loved that. As lowered myself to the bench at Elnora's Point, another heron lifted and disappeared, and I followed it with my eyes, hoping it would calm me. I needed something to calm me. I was panting, slightly dizzy. I was in shock from Abe's dismissal, but under the shock was something deeper. My mind was throbbing, my ears burning at the word Nora had screamed at me. Freak! This freak here. Why has she called me that? What did she know? When I heard the sound of Abe's boots coming downstairs to my workshop, I hunched over my sketch pad, pretending to be drawing. I had Automaris I.O. in its glass case on my drawing table. Abe stayed in the doorway for several silent moments until I looked up at him. His expression was hard to read. I considered that he might actually be angry at me. How was I supposed to know? I exclaimed defensively. How was I supposed to know that you told her zip about this place? You said she didn't want to come out here, but you never once mentioned she didn't even know. I'm so sorry, Pete. The mistake was mine. I should have brought her out here this morning after she arrived. Hell, I should have brought her here right from the train. His apology caught me off guard. So then why didn't you? He slumped into the doorframe and covered his eyes, upset with himself. I don't know. I guess I was afraid. The word brought a memory, his face on the morning after Nora arrived, the fear I had seen in his eyes. Afraid of what, Abe? I asked. Afraid of... How complicated it would be to explain why I'm doing all this work that Paul would have wanted me to do, and why I never made any effort to see her, to even contact her. All these years I pretended she didn't exist. Abe, why didn't her mom ever tell her about Riverside? His face clouded and he lowered his head. I can't speak for Linda, he said. His tone was meant to stop the conversation. I studied him a moment, still leaning, clearly overwhelmed, wrestling with something inside his mind. The silence between us grew awkward. Where is Nora? I asked finally. I took her back to the cabin. Abe, did you tell her anything about me, like personal stuff? I told her you're my assistant, Pete, that's all. Why? No reason, just don't bring her back here, okay? I don't need that kind of drama. I have too much work to do. Don't judge her too hard, he said. It's not her fault. I kept her in the dark about this place. He sighed, still upset with himself. Now I'm going to have to work really hard to get her trust back. Abe, she said she's leaving tomorrow. Did she? She said that every day since she's arrived. So she's not leaving tomorrow? Apparently her stepdad doesn't care that she left, and her mom still hasn't called her. But you said before that she couldn't stay with you. You don't have room. She's my brother's kid, P, and I honestly don't think she has anywhere else to go. I had no answer to this. The thought of Nora staying longer was unbearable, so I lowered my head and pretended to be engrossed in drawing. The only sound in the room was my cross-hatching pencil. Abe left the doorway. I heard the sounds of him driving away and put down my pencil. The blue-black eye spots of the I.O. on my desk stared up at me, asking me why it mattered, why it actually hurt like hell that some girl I didn't like, didn't care about, and hadn't even laid eyes on until a week ago had called me a freak.